Hello, I'm Peter Story, founder and CEO of Greenlit. We're a specialist crowdfunding platform, so very much like those big ones that you've heard of, like Kickstarter and Indiegogo, but we specialize purely in creative projects. So, no taco stands, no gadgets, purely creative projects. Up until now, we've worked exclusively in film. My background is in film production, and we started off basically working with all kinds of films, shorts, features, documentaries, animations, anything film related. And more recently, we're opening up because what we've discovered about audiences, and there'll be much more on that later, what we've discovered is that this is also going to work for music and for theatre. So anything that involves creating a relationship with an audience for a creative work, we think is absolutely perfect for crowdfunding. We try and differentiate ourselves from those big players. I'll explain more about that as we go along through the presentation. So let's kick off. So here's the number one myth. This is the biggest, stinkiest myth there is. This is the myth. This is like the Epic of Gilgamesh, because the number of times I've had to try and dispel this myth, and there are the residual attitudes in the industry come back time and time again, which is crowdfunding is what you do when you can't get the money anywhere else. So, okay, I understand where people are coming from when they suggest that. If you look at crowdfunding, there have been a lot of fairly low quality projects that are crowdfunding. Kickstarter, Indiegogo, there's absolutely no kind of quality control. So people have not necessarily responded to crowdfunded projects in the way that they ought to, because literally anybody can hop up and do it. Not literally anybody can hop up and do it well, but there is a lot of low quality content out there, which has skewed a lot of people's opinions. There's also kind of residual snobbishness. We've always had, particularly in the film sector, but also true within theatre and true within music, we've always had a very kind of top-down system, which started decades ago when films were very expensive things to make, and you had studios. Still to this day, you kind of have the Film Council, sorry, the BFI, as the one great benefactor that sits at the top, dispensing largesse to all you filmmakers out there. And you will spend hours, if not days, on an application, and then you'll get the kind of Gladiator, probably that one, isn't it? And there's a residual sense that if the Film Council approves of something, then that means that there's some intrinsic worth, that the gatekeepers and the people making those judgments have some kind of special knowledge, and the fact that the BFI gives you some money, confers you some status, it's circular, it's self-perpetuating. In reality, I'm not going to slag people off. There are some terrific people within those kind of public sector organisations, absolutely terrific. Ben Roberts has been great as chair of the BFI. Really, really excited to see my friend Mia Bays has just been appointed as head of the Film Fund. So I'm hoping that with a woman like her, with a great commitment to diversity, things might change, and this kind of patronage is going to subside, but we'll see. But the thing is, the Film Council will have I keep calling the Film Council, it's the BFI. It's a BFI. The BFI will have some audiences in mind based on what they've done previously, how they've marketed and sent films out to distribution. The reality is the market they have in mind, the audience they have in mind, probably isn't your audience. It's probably not the people that are into what you're doing. Again, we talk a great deal more about that audience, because that's fundamental to the business of crowdfunding. But you're also going to see the organizations themselves have their intrinsic biases. So whatever you do, if you are rejected, if you're accepted for the BFI funding, good on you. If you're rejected, it's not the be all and the end all, and we're trying to give you another alternative path. It's not better, it's not worse, it's absolutely equal, but it's just different. And we've also, we've seen that in crowdfunding. So some very respected filmmakers have actually used crowdfunding to do projects that are a little bit left field, or a little more personal to them. Hal Hartley did a campaign just last year. Spike Lee's done crowdfunding. Right now, King's speech producer Gareth Ellis Unwin is currently crowdfunding on Kickstarter, a wildlife documentary, which is great. His campaign's going a little slowly, and there's a few things wrong with it. And if he'd come to us, if you're watching, Gareth, you should have come to us. We could have really streamlined things and made them zip along for you. But very best of luck. It kind of demonstrates, there's nobody more in with the established than Oscar winner Gareth Ellis Unwin, but he's doing Kickstarter, so I think that's fantastic. The analogy that I like to use is that if you're going for that kind of money, public sector money, or if you're going for investment from large scale private investors, you get it, it's fantastic. It's like your destination to filmmakingville. They're giving you the bus ticket, and you hop on the bus, and you're going to glide all the way to where you need to be, and onto set and into production. Whereas crowdfunding, it's just another way of getting there. But instead of getting on that bus that somebody else has paid for, you're going to walk. You're going to take that same journey to get to filmmakingville. You're going to take that journey, and you're going to do it one step at a time. And it will be hard work, and you will get blisters, okay? You'll get blisters doing it. But on that walk, you're going to meet people on the way, and you're going to see the scenery, and you're going to smell the flowers. And when you get there, you're going to be leaner, and you're going to be fitter. So the process of crowdfunding, or the process of identifying and working with your audience, is going to make you more complete as an artist. And that can be very, very empowering. So actually doing a crowdfunding campaign can bring you confidence, and can empower you, and can make you a better filmmaker at the end of it. And at the end of that walk, you're not obliged to the powers that be. You're not obliged to tick their boxes or please them. Your responsibility is to your audience, and that is a very, very pure way of making your films. Myth number 2, crowdfunding is all about the money. What, Peter, are you mad? For funding? It's crowdfunding. It's in there. It's right in there. Yeah, okay, that's a big chunk of it, and that's probably why a lot of people are watching this seminar. Of course, it's about the money. That's a very valuable thing, but it's not all about the money. I mean, crowdfunding is hard work. So why are you going to do it? Because the clue again is in the word. It's about the crowd. It's about the audience. It's about the crowd of people that want to hear what you say as a creator. Everybody watching this is a creative. I think it's mostly filmmakers. I believe there are also some theatre makers, some musicians watching this. But when you're creating something, it begins inside with you, okay? But you have something to express to the world. You have something to share with people. You have something that's got to get out there. So for that reason, you need to think about the audience, about the community, about your people. There has been a change. I was talking about, the kind of relics and the top-down structures that we see in those kind of big funders. Those structures have been in place for decades. But what has happened is that the environment's shifted. You know, everybody watching this, you've got a state-of-the-art camera, you've got an edit suite, and it's in your pocket, and you can, and with one click, you can send that, whatever you've just made, you can send it to a worldwide audience. So those structures are transformed beyond belief from what they were, you know, even 15 years ago. What hasn't necessarily changed in that top-down perspective is how you deal with your audience, and how you approach your audience, and how you get visibility. You know, this visibility is the currency. It's the other currency that we traffic in when we do a crowdfunding campaign, is that we're working to get visibility, working to get what you're creating seen and engaged with, primarily by the audience, and primarily the people you want to talk to. But also crowdfunding, if you do it right, it's a fantastic tool for raising visibility within industry, with festival curators, with distributors, with sales agents, and also, you know, if you want to catch the eye of the BFI, this is a very good place to start. When you're putting a crowdfunding campaign together, all the bets are off. You can reach out and talk to whoever you want. So if you've got filmmakers that you admire, producers that you want to get in touch with, your crowdfunding campaign is a showcase. It's a showcase for what you can do and what you want to do. So at a very, very early stage, you can start pushing that and punting it and sending it out to people. And that can be incredibly powerful when you make those connections. It's not a given. You have to be persistent in those connections that you want to make, but you all know this anyway. But when it happens, the crowdfunding platform is a terrific excuse to start doing that and start trying to contact people. Number 3, crowdfunding is asking people for money. What? Again? Surely, literally, crowdfunding is literally asking people to put money into your film. Well, not so fast. I hate seeing it framed like that, because if you view your crowdfunding campaign as going out and asking people for money, that sets up a power dynamic. That sets up a preconceived idea of the relationship between you, the creator, asking for money, and the backer, as somebody offering, you know, patronage, dropping a few coins in your hat. All right, that is not how crowdfunding works. It's not about benevolence. It's not about being a supplicant and asking people to just contribute for nothing in return. I think it's a very English thing. You know, when I'm dealing with creators, particularly from America, there's much more kind of outgoing attitude about asking for people money without actually asking people for money, if you see what I'm saying. And I think it's also a class-based thing. You know, we've seen in the news this week that the Prime Minister has not slightest compunction in asking his mates for £200,000 for furniture. Whereas, you know, my working class family would be like, what? You don't ask people for things like that. You just don't do. You have too much pride. And this is the mentality that we absolutely have to shed. And so many filmmakers I speak to have this mentality that there's something wrong in asking people for money. What's really happening when you're doing a crowdfunding campaign and when you're talking to somebody and when they choose to back you, there's an exchange going on there. Okay, it's an exchange. It's a transaction, because they're getting something out of it as well. And there's a whole bunch of reasons that people back crowdfunding campaigns. They support your idea, they support you, they want to see you succeed, they want some of the swag, they want to see, the most compelling reason is that they want to see this film or this piece of music or this stage production, they want to see it come to life, and they want to come along that journey and play a little bit in supporting that thing being finally made flesh. And that's we call them rewards because it is literally rewarding to people. So if you're reticent about crowdfunding because of this idea that it's somehow related to begging, you can forget that immediately. It's an exchange of equals, and people want to support you. They're out there, it's true. Myth number 4. Crowdfunding is for people with rich friends and rich family. Okay. Like everything else in life, if you've got a rich family and if you've got rich friends, certain things are going to be easier for you. That's how the world rolls. If your immediate neighborhood of contacts and associates and are affluent enough to be able to back you, then you have got a head start, and that is bully for you. Fantastic. That's great. And I'm not being an inverse snob about people with those resources to call on. But I'm making this point because it's a question that we get asked an awful lot. No, you don't have to have rich friends and family, but here's what you are going to have to do. You're going to have to take that fight right down to the streets, and you are going to have to be tougher and more persistent and more energetic and more passionate and talk to more people. That's it. It's going to be harder work for you, but it can very, very definitely be done. In terms of friends, do you have a large friendship group? A variation on this question is how can I ask people who aren't my friends to contribute? How do I get past that circle of friends? And that again is a difficult question, but it's one we have an answer to. If you're going out to a wider group of people, a truism is that people actually don't give money to strangers, and they don't necessarily give money to strangers' projects. But what is true is that the old saying that a stranger is a friend that you just haven't met yet. And if you take that on board and think about how can I build the relationship with my backers? So if there is a theme, or if there is a group that you're trying to address, if you're on a Facebook group or on a subreddit or any of those things, you don't just jump in and ask for money. You actually have to earn your spurs and earn your credibility by being a member of the community. And that can take time, but it's the way forward. So the people that you're going to pitch to when your campaign goes live, they're no longer strangers. They're actually your friends as well. And they actually have a handle on who you are and a little depth of understanding and a bit of knowledge about you as a person, rather than just somebody jumping in and spamming them. So you get over that stranger thing quite a way and make them your friends. Okay, let's bust that one. Myth number 5, it's all about the idea. Well, a great idea is a great idea, and that's as far as it goes. We've had and also seen a lot of creators with projects that have a very specific subject matter that would have a community of interest around it. So, a project around mental health issues, a project around homelessness, a project around Parkinson's disease. I'll probably talk more about that one specifically shortly. But all of those things are just ideas, and the assumption that somebody is going to jump in simply because they respond to the fact that it's about an issue they care about, that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. If you're treating a subject matter, you have to be taken seriously. So much like I was saying on the previous slide, if you're approaching a group of people to begin with, even if you have a topic of interest and a community of interest, you have to be seen to be sincere and credible and know what you're talking about. So the idea itself is a starting point, but it's not the totality of what your campaign has to be. And again, another truism in all walks of life is that's down to execution as well. So by understanding the crowdfunding process and the materials and how you communicate over the course of a campaign, that is what gives your idea legs. So don't be complacent about the fact that you've got a strong or original or an idea that appeals to a particular community. It's probably not going to be enough. Next one, crowdfunding is passive. Okay, this again is a monster myth, and it's one that we have to break to creators, and we've kind of baked it into the processes that we use as a platform to encourage people to actually put the work in. Crowdfunding is a lot of work. A lot of people think that you can be very complacent again in just posting up your campaign, you know, sticking it on Kickstarter, making a quick video, up you go, and money's going to roll in. Never happens. Never happens. If you want to get the maximum value out of the period of your campaign, you basically have to treat this as a full-time job. You are going to be constantly reaching out to people. You're going to be constantly fleshing out your campaign and giving it context, by which I mean you're going to, classic strategy is, while your campaign's up and live, you're going to create content around it, because people see the depth and they see behind the scenes, and they really genuinely respond to that. So, you know, you will be posting updates, you will be posting video content, even if it's just something you grab with your phone. You know, here we are looking at some locations, here we are doing a casting, here I am with the costume designer. All of those things are magic, but you've got to be committed, and you've got to put stuff out regularly. It is not a case of set and forget. And an addendum to that is persistence is everything. So we recommend, when you're doing your outreach and when you're trying to get in front of many people, actually take the trouble to log your communications. Persistence is just huge, because, you know, I get, I don't know, 300 emails a day, and many of them contain good content, but if I can't look at them there and then and deal with them there and then, they will kind of get a bit forgotten. So I don't mind if you send me a follow-up email if I don't respond, and another follow-up email, and another follow-up email. It's kind of a sub myth. All right, I'm gonna stick it here. It doesn't warrant a myth on its own, but it's a sub myth that if you are constantly reaching out to people, that they're going to get fed up with you, or they're going to think less of you for annoying them. Now, as long as you're not actually spamming people, because there's a world of difference between spam. We know what it is. We know what it looks like. We know what it smells like. Spam won't win you any friends. Personalized emails on a persistent basis, or personalized posts over social or approaches over social, you can do those more than a few times till you get in touch with the right person. There's no problem. People won't think any less of you for doing it. That kind of persistence takes effort, and it takes organization. So what you probably want to do is to avoid overlapping with serious pre-production or rehearsals or actual production. If you try and overlap your crowdfunding campaign with that, you're going to have much less time, and one of the two things, and generally the campaign will get neglected. That said, there are ways around it. We've got some larger projects coming up where the crowdfunding campaigns do actually span production. We've had to extend that right out to take the workload off the people actually making the film, take the workload off the producer and the director, so that they can actually separate and distinguish between the crowdfunding campaign and the production itself, because, as I say, there's no point in doing half measures on either. So yeah, not a passive process. Very much related is the idea that the work starts when the campaign begins. No. Prepare to, no, let me get this the right way around. Fail to prepare and you prepare to fail. Another one of my cheesy aphorisms for the evening. Planning is absolutely key. We mentioned already, if you're starting to reach out to people that might be interested in your project, those communities of interest, whether they're online, whether they're in real life, you can't just drop in and say, hi, give me some money. You have to build credibility within those communities, and you need, if you're not doing it already, if you're not already enmeshed in the communities you're talking to, you got to start doing that 2 to 3 months beforehand. So making people aware of who you are, not necessarily asking them for money, not necessarily telling them you're doing a creative project at this stage, but just to participate in those communities so people recognize where you are. You're going to have to prepare your material. There's the very visible material that's essential to crowdfunding campaign, which is your pitch video, and it's your written pitch. So the page that would sit on Greenlit or Kickstarter or wherever, with that fundamental information. But that's like the tip of the iceberg, because below the waterline, massive quantity of stuff that needs to be prepared. So you're going to be sending out content and trying to talk to people, trying to engage to people over the course of your campaign. And the way to do that is to plan it. It's much more effective if you plan it, if you think about your messaging, if you think about what you're going to be talking about in week 1. Is there a slightly different theme you can move about to talk about on week 2? Can you talk about something different week 3? So thinking about the different aspects of your campaign and the content that you're going to be sending out to support that campaign, that benefits from a bit of planning. It's very, very good idea to get together a calendar that's accessible for yourself and for your team, not merely to coordinate things between the team. Something that's really, really important is about keeping yourself on track. So if you get up in the morning and you're like, well, all right, just get some coffee and then I'll just, stick the TV on for half an hour and, watch some anime, and suddenly it's lunchtime. It's very, very easy to do. A calendar and a planning and things to do, points of action to do on each day throughout your campaign. If you can schedule those in advance, it's a very, very good tool for keeping yourself on track and keeping yourself motivated. It kind of takes the element of choice out of it. Shall I slack off a little bit today? No, I've got to do this. So it's a really, really good technique, and doing that prior to the campaign so you can work like a machine alongside your team. Hugely, hugely valuable technique. You can do it on your own in your spare time. We kind of touched on the spare time thing when we were talking about those, how necessary it is to not have it overlapping your production, because if you're doing it properly, you should be almost treating this as a full-time job, because there are a lot of people out there in the world who may be interested in your film or your creative project. So you're going to spend a lot of time endeavoring to get in touch with them. Similarly, if you try and overlap with production, or even with your full-time job, that's quite challenging, because one or the other of those things will get neglected. I know it's often challenging, particularly if you're working full-time, but there is a solution. And one of the biggest determinants of the success of a campaign is whether it's an individual doing it or whether there's a team around you. And first of all, it's useful to have a team because you can spread the work around. If you're cold calling, cold emailing, approaching people over social, you can divide it up. Different people within a team can have different roles. and different functions and different quantities of work to do. So it's spreading that around. The second benefit of having a team is going to be motivation. And I mentioned this before. Halfway through the campaign, you're getting a little underwhelmed because it's fatiguing. If you've got somebody around you, you've got other people expecting you, other people waiting on you, that's a massive incentive to keep going, and it's a massive boost because you can just help one another and motivate one another and give each other that little push of support. So massively useful. Who's going to be in your team? Look, filmmaking is a collaborative business. Being in a band is a collaborative business. Being on stage, massively collaborative business. So there will be other people around you. You're not necessarily the auteur here. There will be other people around you who have got a very strong interest in getting the project to fruition. So think about those people who are actually involved in the creativity, their presence on a campaign, absolutely massive. Really recommend doing that if you can. Myth number 9, influencers. So look, the idea of an influencer has become very devalued. And when I use the word influencer, most people immediately associate that with a Kardashian or somebody whose influence exists within the context of social media. People tend to think of big influencers, those with large followings, whether that's in tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, or even millions. That's not the kind of influence you necessarily want, because what we've seen on campaigns that have sought to engage via those influencers is that it's often a very superficial level. They have broad level of influence, but a very broad range of influence, but a very shallow level of influence. So unless somebody's deeply engaged with your project, simply getting somebody to send a tweet or a post on Instagram is going to be a lot less effective than people think. If it's actually somebody you're working with and they've got skin in the game, they've got an actual interest in the project, if they understand the project and can talk about it and can offer some depth, that does help. We saw an example of that. We had a film called Moustache Man at the start of the year, and we had Mark Gatiss as he was in the film, but he also posted up just a brief little video in which he talked about how much he liked the project, how much he respected the director, and that paid dividends. Mark has a following from his many acting roles, and it actually worked. If he just sent out a tweet, it would have had negligible difference. So a little bit more engagement with there. I'd also say that your influencers can be somebody with just a few hundred or a few thousand followers within social media, if the depth of their influence is there. So if it's somebody who is a respected voice within a community, or if it's a tastemaker, a respected DJ, or a respected theatre critic even, they can have more credibility with a less broad pool of individuals, pool of audience. That can be much more powerful than trying to go wide and shallow. So that's what you want to think about when you're going out to engage influencers on that level. Myth number 10. Okay, now it's time for the not so humble brag. Kickstarter and Indiegogo, one of the things that I discovered quite early on was that they're not set up for creative projects. You're going to get lost on the front page, and that's kind of a function of how their business model works. Those big platforms tend to go at scale, so so they don't necessarily care whether a specific project is successful, is unsuccessful. It doesn't kind of matter. They're playing a longer game, which is on aggregate, do enough projects, hit their targets to make their 5% and make them profitable. That's what they do. it's fine. You know, they're glorified payment platforms. What we try and do in Greenlit is slightly different in that every project that comes through matters to us. You know, we want to see it succeed, and we want to keep an eye on it. So we'll share all the knowledge that we've got, whatever knowledge that we've got about best practice. And I've given a few ideas in this seminar about what works and what doesn't. We've obviously got a bunch of practical tools that can translate that into actually doing things on your campaign, and a roadmap and ideas for how to manage a campaign that will hopefully get you better results than simply going to one of those commodity platforms. It was kind of interesting when I was putting Greenlit together as an idea. One of the statistics that was an absolute kicker for me was that of the big platforms, only approximately 5% of pledges come from people kind of browsing the site or seeing the email, or even being a project we like. 5%, which is a very small amount of drive-by pledging. And that told me that they don't have a big advantage. Even though they're huge incumbents, they don't have a big advantage. So our philosophy is the only way we can beat them at that game is by making your campaign 10% better. And if we do that, we're on top. We're a small platform, but we're on top. That's us. You'll be able to find Greenlit. I mean, you're already on the Greenlit site because you're watching this, but we're very easy to contact. You can hit us up. You can find us on social. And finally, because we're Greenlit, because we go that bit further, I've got not just 10 myths of crowdfunding for you, but we've actually got myth number 11, which again I come up against from creators time again. And a lot of people have reservations about it. A lot of people have reservations about the fact that it's entrepreneurial, in that it's hard work and you've got no guarantee of success at the end of it. You know, you can shorten your odds, we can give you best practice, but there's no guarantee of results at the end. So that can be quite intimidating. It can, as we suggested, it can be huge for building your audience and your contacts as well as the money, but you've got to have the confidence to do it. And this myth is a reflection of the fact that I have seen so many campaigns hampered by the lack of confidence on the part of the filmmaker, and the lack of, if you are a creative person, you identify very closely with what you're creating and with the project that you're pouring your artistic soul into, and if people are rejecting that can be very hurtful. Or if people make snide comments on social, that can be very hurtful. All I can say is there's always going to be haters, and they're surprisingly easy to ignore. And the fear of being put down, the fear of being rejected, is an awful lot worse than the actual experience of it. There's an old saying that 99 no's gets you to the 100th yes, and it's very true. And the only way you're going to up your quotient of yeses is by up your quotient of no's as well. So 10x your no's and learn to live with it. You'll 10x your yeses at the same time. I mean, the nearest analogy, the most recent analogy for myself is when I was putting Greenlit together, literally on my own, literally in my back bedroom. And I talked freely with a lot of my friends. Some of my friends have been very supportive, bouncing ideas, enthusiastic, and vibing off the ideas, which have made Greenlit a better thing. I've also been met with something bordering on scorn or ridicule from my friends, not because they want to put me down, but because they thought they were being realistic about the chances of taking something from that scale and taking on these huge behemoth American corporations. And the reality is, I am fortunate that I'm quite a stubborn person, and criticism can crush me, but I will still, you know, get up again. Like Hercules Mulligan, you knock me down, I get the fuck back up again. If you can bring yourself to do that, then nothing can stop you. Then you're a creative person, and you create things. Whatever you're working on, it didn't exist. It didn't exist before. It started off in your head, and you've made it flesh. You know, you are making this thing absolutely real. You're bringing something to the universe that was never there before. So look, the process of crowdfunding is all of a part of that, and it's all about telling people how and why you're willing this thing into existence out of sheer force of will. That's the experience of what crowdfunding is, and it can be incredibly rewarding. Thanks for joining. I genuinely hope that's been interesting, and we can, you know, we'll be doing a few more of these events regularly, in which perhaps we'll talk about more practical rather than the conceptual and the myth making. You can find me on Twitter, I'm Story7, or even better, go through our social handles. They're linked at the bottom of the page you're looking at. Greenlit Fund on Twitter and on Instagram, and indeed on Facebook. Or you can email me straight, pete@greenlit.com. I will deal with it personally, or I will forward it to one of my fantastic team, and we'll try and get back to you, because we do try and be the friendly guys. Brilliant. Thank you so much for joining, and good luck with your projects, whatever stage you are. And if we can be any part of that journey, if we can help you build that audience, get that money, and make that thing real, that's what we're here for. It's what we do all day long. So thanks a lot. Bye-bye.